From my personal experience, how the Palestinian Authority perceived Tony Blair in the quartet, he was totally unequivocally supporting Israel all the time. So how could he also be an honest broker of peace and development and what have you, if he doesn't have his own personal agenda?
The Israeli Prime Minister's speech to the UN was boycotted by dozens of diplomats who left the Assembly Hall as he took to the podium. He said his message was not only to world leaders, but he had another audience.
I want to do something I've never done before. I want to speak from this forum directly to those hostages through loudspeakers. I've surrounded Gaza with massive loudspeakers connected to this microphone in the hope that our dear hostages will hear my message.
The speech was also broadcast to the phones of people living in Gaza. I spoke to Anshel Pfeffer, who's Netanyahu's biographer, about that.
It was grotesque, no question about it. And once again, it was, I mean, we're not yet in an official election season, but there will be elections in Israel in about a year, perhaps a bit less. And this was just a stunt for his base. The moment it happened, there were lots of pictures of it happening from his office to the Israeli media. But from footage coming out of Gaza, it was barely audible. It was you could barely even recognize that it was Netanyahu's voice, much less discern the words. I'm very skeptical that the Israeli hostages still alive in Gaza, in tunnels underground or wherever they're being hidden, could hear it or certainly get any comfort from it.
Netanyahu also addressed leaders whose nations have criticised Israel's actions.
When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, for many countries here, when the going got tough, you caved. And here's the shameful result of that collapse. For much of the past 2 years, Israel has had to fight a seven-front war against barbarism, with many of your nations opposing us. Astoundingly, as we fight the terrorists who murdered many of your citizens, you are fighting us. You condemn us, you embargo us, and you wage political and legal warfare, it's called lawfare, against us. I say to the representatives of those nations, this is not an indictment of Israel. It's an indictment of you. It's an indictment of weak-kneed leaders who appease evil rather than support a nation whose brave soldiers guard you from the barbarians at the gate. They're already penetrating your gates. When will you learn?
Well, that was Netanyahu addressing the UN General Assembly. Let's speak now to Steve Brisley, brother-in-law of Eli Sharabi, who was held for 491 days by Hamas. Eli's wife and daughters were killed on October the 7th. Steve Brisley, thank you very much for joining us.
Evening, Kathy.
I just wanted your reaction first to Netanyahu's speech there, in particularly this idea that it was being broadcast into Gaza, and into the ears of the hostages.
Well, I don't think anybody really believes that a single hostage who's being held in the terror tunnels is going to have heard a single word of it. Realistically, what hostage families want is action, not words. Political theatre such as this is not going to bring the hostages home, and it distracts from the human reality here that this is not about politics. This is about people. This is about 48 hostages whose families want to welcome them home and hug them or give them a decent burial that they've been denied, and it's to cease the suffering of innocent people in Gaza. And I don't see how a stunt like this is going to achieve any of that.
I mean, there was a mother of a hostage outside the speech saying that this was psychological abuse, that, all they wanted to hear from Netanyahu, as you've just explained, is just the words that their relatives, their loved ones are free. Did you see it as kind of grotesque, as Anshel Pfeffer put it, or psychological abuse?
I mean, what I see is just a repetition of what we've seen before. What a true sign of leadership is finding a way to defeat terror and save lives on both sides of the border. And so I try not to get too involved in the political rhetoric of all this, but I view everything like this through one single lens. Is this going to do anything practically on the ground to bring the hostages home and end suffering? And I struggle to see how anything that Netanyahu has said in that speech will help either one of those situations.
And you talk about suffering on both sides of the border, and obviously he addressed the point about genocide and pushed back strongly on that. But he also said, we have not forgotten you, to the hostages. Do you worry that the way this war is being prosecuted, the way it's being extended, means that hostage families do feel forgotten?
Very much so. I mean, the Netanyahu government has consistently publicly said that the hostages are the primary, primary concern. That's not how we feel at the moment. If that was the case, a deal would have been done and the hostages would have been home some time ago. Netanyahu keeps on talking about total victory and how it's been close to being secured in early 2024, mid 2024, late 2024, all the way through 2025, and we're still not there. I think people forget, though, that this started because of a brutal terrorist attack by Hamas, and we need to make sure that we don't just focus on Israel, that we do focus on the instigators of this, being Hamas. One of the things that we've asked the UK government to do is to take sanctions against Hamas, against their financiers, against their facilitators, and the UK government has said that they intend to do that in the coming weeks, but quite what that means, nobody knows. We need action now that will change things on the ground.
And Eli was released in February. His wife, your sister, and their daughters were killed by Hamas on October the 7th. How are you all doing now? How is Eli doing? How are you doing?
Well, Eli is doing everything that he can to secure the release of the remaining hostages, because much as he's an inspirational man who's advocating for the hostages and is improving health-wise, he says that he cannot feel like he has really truly left the terror tunnels until all of those hostages are home. And it's the same for the rest of our wider British family and our Israeli family, that Eli's brother Yossi, his body remains in Gaza, and his wife and 3 daughters can't concentrate fully on life without a grave to visit. We've got Avinatan Orr, whose British mother I've spent time with. He's missed his sister's wedding, for example. And, those are family things. So we're thinking about the faces that are missing around dinner tables and the people who have got no grave to mourn at. And that's at the centre of everything we do and everything that we think about.
Of course. And you talk about Eli's health improving, but how is he still struggling health-wise?
I mean, physically, he's being well looked after. He's gaining weight after having been starved and lost 4 stone whilst in captivity. But obviously, without going into too much detail, he has to have regular physio. He has to have counselling and therapy. And it's something that's going to one extent or another, dominate the rest of his life. He keeps on, as I say, he's an inspiration and says how he chooses life and chooses to go forward, but he can't truly move on to that next chapter of whatever his life brings until those 48 hostages are home.
Of course. And just finally, you had this sort of throwaway remark, really, by Donald Trump earlier today that he thought that a peace deal, it was pretty much there. Presumably you're hoping against hope that is the case. Do you have any confidence, though?
To be honest, no. I mean, hope is all that we've got. Hope and our humanity are the only 2 things that Hamas are not able to take away from us. We've heard details of a deal for what seems like years now, but okay, it's the last 6, 8, 9 months. Nothing has changed. I'll believe it when I see it. A motto of ours is don't get excited until there's something to get excited about. And Donald Trump has said this on a number of occasions over the last few weeks, and nothing has materialized. So I'll believe it when I see those first hostages being put into Red Cross transport and brought back to Israeli soil. Absolutely.
Steve Brisley, thank you very much for joining us. The brother-in-law of Eli Sharabi there, who was held for 491 days by Hamas. Well, let's speak now to Professor Manuel Hassassian, who's ambassador for the Palestinian Authority to Copenhagen, formerly to London, who's on the line now. But Professor, I just want to ask you where we left off there with our previous interviewee on the possibility of a peace deal that Trump alluded to. Do you think that is possible, likely now?
Well, I think that President Trump has the upper hand and he can flex muscle on Israel, basically to stop this carnage and to accept, the rules of the armistice. And I'm sure that Hamas will release the hostages if there is a withdrawal of the occupying forces from Gaza, because they cannot continue suffering from the carnage of war. And I think the only one who could really influence Israel, not the international community, which they did not really respect him when he gave his speech at the United Nations. Most of them have left, the empty seats. But only President Trump can really materialize this.
Right.
And I think Hamas is ready to release the hostages if their conditions also are met with the release of political prisoners, Palestinians, and the withdrawal from Gaza.
I mean, there's nothing to stop Hamas releasing the hostages now, of course. But, as you point out, much of Netanyahu's, how he conducts himself depends on America's backing. And a lot of his speech was aimed at America, quite clearly. That support from Donald Trump does appear to be very solid at the moment. And perhaps that allowed Netanyahu to push back strongly against claims of genocide occurring in Gaza.
Well, let me tell you that even President Trump is becoming really an embarrassment to represent, Israel and to support Israel. The international community has said its word in the recognition of the state of Palestine. And everybody is using the same language. Even B'Tselem, the human rights organization, UNICEF, Amnesty International are saying that what Israel is committing is a genocide. So they cannot really shy from the actual facts on the ground. And I think President Trump made a statement today. He said, I will never allow Netanyahu to cede the West Bank. And he was against, what the settlers are doing in the West Bank. And he believes that the epicenter of security is not the ultimate, triumph over Iran, Yemen, Syria, Lebanon, and what have you. The epicenter of peace and security in the Middle East is the resolution of the Palestinian conflict.
But let me just pick up on what you said about a genocide there, because, Netanyahu very firmly pushed back on that in his speech to the UN. And I just quote what he said to you. He said, would a country committing genocide plead with the civilian population it is supposedly targeting to get out of harm's way? He also pointed out that Israel had dropped millions of leaflets, sent millions of text messages, made countless phone calls urging civilians to leave Gaza City. I just put it to you that that's not the act of someone perpetuating genocide.
Well, actually, I beg to differ with you, and I beg to differ with Netanyahu, because Netanyahu's aim is to flatten Gaza and make the Gazans, accept the reality of the invasion into Gaza. Where are they going to go? You tell me. Is there a very safe place in Gaza? Everywhere is targeted. So the simple fact that he is sending leaflets and what have you, this is all pack of lies, and we shouldn't really fall into his trap by always, trying to rationalize what he's doing in Gaza. This is insane and ridiculous. Questions like this, should not be asked.
Okay.
It should be asked to Netanyahu himself.
Well, we'd be very happy.
In Gaza.
We'd be very happy to interview Netanyahu, of course. Let's assume that peace happens. Let's hope that peace happens. And I just want to ask you about what happens after that, because there's now this suggestion that Tony Blair, the former UK Prime Minister, would have this role in a post-war authority before handing back control to the Palestinians. Are you happy with his involvement as set out? Is that something you support?
Well, I don't support Tony Blair because, also when I was ambassador in the UK, I have seen how he acted on the war of Iraq and how he pledged many promises to my president when we visited him as a state visit, to solve the Palestinian problem. We haven't seen anything of that. I'm not sure that he is the trusted one. And as his role as the leader of the quartet has proven his ultimate failure in conducting, the negotiations between Palestinians and Israelis. Therefore, but the concept of having an international intervention in Gaza with the support and with the presence of the Palestinian Authority is something that we have basically to discuss.
Right. So this sounds like a bit of a non-starter, having Tony Blair involved in the way that has been set out.
Well, this is my personal opinion. I don't know whether my president will agree to what I'm saying, but this is the president who makes the decisions. But from my personal experience, how the Palestinian Authority perceived Tony Blair in the quartet, he was totally unequivocally supporting Israel all the time. So how could he also be an honest broker of peace and development and what have you, if he doesn't have his own personal agenda? And I
Okay.
think, President Trump will make a grave mistake in sending him, because he is not popular, he's not accepted, not only by the Palestinians, by the entire Arab world.
Professor Manuel Hassassian, thank you very much for joining us. The ambassador for the Palestinian Authority to Copenhagen there.